Does that, you can hear me too. I can, very quietly I can talk. Oh, Todd. Okay. Boy, did that make you jump. I'm trying to get my granddaughter in the back. You know, her and Caitlin back there talking. Good morning. Last week we started talking about the book of Ecclesiastes and some of the things it has to offer for us today. And we're going to continue that. We went through the first 2 chapters, and I'm going to try to each week just take 2 chapters and talk about that, because they put me on a time limit on how many lessons I could teach. And when they do that, it makes it very difficult for me, because I like a lot more interaction, and when you have a lot more interaction, then you don't get as far in the book. So we're going to start in chapter 3. Just a little bit of overview is Ecclesiastes is kind of a downer book. You know, it's all about vanity is vanity, 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 everything's vanity. Everything's meaningless. What does it matter? What's the big deal? Nothing really means anything. That's the way and it says everything's meaningless. That wisdom's meaningless. We talked last week about wisdom being meaningless, pleasures being meaningless, and toils being meaningless. And then we talked about how the same fate awaits both the wise, and how it's better to be wise than foolish. But then on the other hand, whether you're wise or whether you're foolish, we all have the same fate. And we all have the same thing, whether you look forward to it or not, and that is we all die. So what good did it do for us to have all these toils and labors under the sun? And so when we look at that and we see that we all die, then, what's the big deal? So we start out, and the other thing that I'm just going to reemphasize, that whether you get anything out of this class or not, by the time we get through this class, you can say, well, yes, I've read through the book, or I have heard the book of Ecclesiastes, because we're going to read the book. I guess I can't not read the book. So we're going to start in chapter 3, verse 1. It says, there is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to root up. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace. What did he leave out? What about life? What did he leave out? Not really anything. Do we sometimes have trouble finding the right thing to do at the right time? Let me put it this way. Does anybody besides me have trouble knowing what to do at the right time, at the right space, at the right... It's, there's a time to hug and there's a time to refrain from hugging. Okay. When do you hug and when do you not hug? If you ask my mom, there is no time not to hug. If you ask me, there's plenty of times not to hug. So how do you figure these things out? A time to mourn and a time to laugh. A time to be happy, a time to be sad. How do you figure all this out? That's a question. That's not, I have the answer. There you go. Everything is going to happen. Everything is going to, yes. Oh, yeah. He mixes it all together. But I do from time to time struggle. Because I shouldn't have gave that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have done something different. I should have, and we second guess ourselves, and But there's a time for everything. What's the very first thing that he says, though? What's the very first? There's a time to be born, and there's a time to die. And in between the time that we are born and the time that we die, all of these other things come into play. All of them. Now, does that mean that's what happens with the Christian? Okay, who said it? Everybody. 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 It doesn't matter whether you're a Christian, whether you're not a Christian. All of these things happen to you. And that's the thing about Ecclesiastes. He's not necessarily talking to Christians. He's talking about life in general. Do what? No, exactly. No, Christians did not exist at that time. I mean, they were Israelites, because but God's people, God's chosen people, but no, Christians did not. But for us, and that's what I want to make sure that we understand. This is, Solomon's talking to the whole world. Everybody's included in this. What do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in His time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from the beginning to the end. I know there is nothing better than for people to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat, drink, and be satisfied in their toil. This is the gift of God. No, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can be taken away from it. God does it so that people will fear Him. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Does that mean that death is beautiful? What after death? But doesn't everything that we've talked about, all the things that he said, you know, the one of them that gets me is there's a time to, where is it? Right here. A time to search and a time to give up. Sometimes we start searching for things and we're searching for the wrong things. So there's a time that we need to say, hey, I had a cousin who had a pretty valuable stallion stole out of his, he had a place right beside the road, had a barn there and had a trailer sitting right there. And that somebody came backed up to that trailer, hooked onto the trailer, put the horse in the trailer. For 2 years, he searched for that horse. And he searched for it, and he searched for it, and he searched for it. 2 years. Never found it. Sometimes it's just... It was a thing. It was a thing. Sometimes it's time to give up and say, I don't need to, I've done all I can do. I can't look anymore.
There's situations in life that show up in our path. Maybe a family member, maybe a friend, maybe someone that we've been trying to help. How do we know when it's time
To give up. And those are things that it's difficult to know, but it still goes back to God is the one in control of that. If you've tried and you've tried and you've tried, it's time to give up. If you not give up as in I don't care anymore, but not put my efforts into that. He's made everything beautiful. He has set eternity in the human heart. Do you think the wicked know they're wicked? In the most part. Any thoughts over here? Do you think the wicked know they're wicked? Why? Because even though they're wicked, God set it in their hearts. They know what's good. They know, but they choose not to do it. And you can't say, well, no, they just do it because they don't know. Well, they may not know. They may not know Jesus. They may not, but eternity is set in people's mind. There's something, people know there's something more because God said it there. Well, since you were a little late coming in, not that I'm going to call you out on it or anything, but since you were a little late coming in, we've already determined that there was no Christians at this time. So this is talking about, we're talking about people in general, the whole people in general, not just this time, but people in general. Because we're going to get down here in just a second where, and I didn't read it yet, but we'll read it in just a second. Whatever God does will endure forever. That's in verse 14. God does it so that people will fear Him. So God's put it in in their minds about eternity. And in verse 15 it says, what is already has been is what has been before, and God will call the past to account. So whatever you do, God will call it to account. You go back over to chapter 1, verse 9, it says, what has been will be, and what will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Now, is he talking about there's been spaceships before? And there's, computers are a new thing. Okay. He's not talking about that kind of stuff. The whole thing is talking about our human lives, how we interact with people, how we live with people, how people treat one another, and that sort of thing. So when you say there's no new thing under the sun, there's not anything that anybody can do that somebody hadn't already done. And not only somebody has already done it, there's going to be somebody else that's going to do it again. We can't just say we're going to put a stop to this. We're going to, and this will never happen again. In human life, nobody's ever going to steal again because we put a stop to stealing. No, that's not going to happen. There's always going to be those people and stuff, and the life cycle is going to continue on, just like it always has. No new thing. There's no new thing under the sun. Nothing new. Yes. Yes. This. Right. Right. Okay. I saw something else, verse 16. I saw something else under the sun. That in the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there.
Not much of a wonder.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity and a time to judge every deed. I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like animals. Surely the fate of human being is like that of animals. The same fate awaits them both. One dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust. All return and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward and if the spirit of animals goes into the earth? So I saw there was nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what happens after them? do we see, just asking, do we see in our human world any injustices in the justice system? I mean, I would just ask it because, sometimes I see things that other people don't see, and it may be because they're not there, so I'm just asking. And when it comes to, has anybody been wrongfully convicted? When we get over into chapter 10, it says something about money talks. Money talks. You can get by with things if you have enough money. We see that in the world all the time. So, what advantage do we have over animals? None. That's what it says. It says it right there, doesn't it? Except for what? It says that God's testing us. And it says that we have, He's not testing the animals, He's testing us. So there's got to be more to it, because when you go back just a little bit, it says it put eternity in their hearts. So the only advantage that we have over animals is that when we do die, Kelvin, we have a chance to go up or not. Right? Who? I don't know that. All I know is that when it says right here that that the spirit he who knows if the human spirit rises upward, and if the spirit of the animals go into the earth. That's all I know. That's all I know. Say it again, Sarah. Who knows? Who knows? So you're asking me, do I know? Who knows? Who knows? But I know this, I don't have as much trouble if I have a cow that has gotten down and there just ain't really no hope for her. I don't have a problem taking a gun and shooting that cow and putting it out of its misery. But if my wife gets down to where she's not getting up, I'm not going to get a gun and shoot her in the head and put her out of her misery. Because I didn't call her cow. I was just comparing. It's a comparison. I would not do that because I love my wife. I used the cow. I love my wife. I use the cow. Why do I use the cow? Because I look at cows as a thing, as something that God has given me to use on this earth while I'm here. And it's not a love-hate relationship. Now, I could have been a lot worse and said some other things, but I'm not going to say it because then I'd really be in trouble. So we're going to move on. Let's see. So let's go into chapter 4 because I've got about 15 minutes and we'll try to get through some of this. It says, "Again I looked and saw the oppression that it was taken under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, that they have no comforter. The power was on the side of the oppressor, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. Better than both is the one who was never born, who has not seen the evil done under the sun. I saw that all toil and all achievements spring from one person's envy of another. To this is meaningless and chasing after wind. Fools fold their hands and ruin themselves. Better one handful with tranquility than two handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Which what? Which part?
Better one handful of tranquility than two handfuls of all the chasing of the wind.
Okay. Is it better?
Never mind.
Oh. Are you good? No, go ahead. Which is better? To sit down and eat and have a steak dinner, wondering where your next steak dinner is going to come from? Or is it better to sit down and eat a hamburger and know that you can eat hamburgers for the rest of your life?
Or if you take two steps forward,
And
everything blew up, you had to go back to where you started again, or go back a little ways and fix it. You know,
it's better to have a little bit and be at peace with that than it is to have a whole lot and not have any peace. Work yourself to death. That's right. That's right. Have you noticed that the oppressed have no comforter? I think about this, and this is back in the day when I was in school. There was a thing that we did, and we didn't call it bullying. We called it. We didn't really call it anything. We just did it. But there were some kids that had a really, really, really hard time in high school. I mean, really, really hard. They were picked on all the time. And just constantly picked on and picked on and picked on and picked on. And they could go home and they could tell their parents, and their parents could call the school, and of course, nowadays you can't do that, but and don't worry, later on it'll be back that way again, so because nothing new under the sun. But those kids were relentlessly picked on. They had nobody to stand up for them. The power was in the oppressor, the one who was. Now, does that make that right? No, it doesn't. And I hate to say this, and I hate to admit this, but I was kind of on the oppressor side and not on the oppressed side. But I did finally, about 3/4 of the way through high school, start saying to myself, self, this is not the way to be. And so I tried to be a little bit more helpful when those things come around. But the oppressor's got nobody. They've got nobody. And the oppressor himself keeps on because he has the power to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was trying to get clarification on this because they're talking about the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter.
They have no comforter.
And the power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter.
They have no comforter either because they can't.
So
Neither one of them have a comforter. But the oppressed have the power. But they have no comforter. Did I feel good about being the oppressor? Not really. I just knew I wasn't the one that was being oppressed. I knew I wasn't the one being bullied. So I was happy with that. I was happy with my own self. Which now now y'all have an insight to how bad a person I can be. So there you go. There you go. Let's see. It talks about how and you know, some of this you just kind of don't even want to talk about, but you know, which is better, to have already lived and died, and now you're not oppressed, you don't have any of that pressure on you anymore? Is it better to be the oppressor? Is it better to be the oppressed? Is it better? What's better? Is it better that you weren't ever even born? What's better? Do you have a choice? You don't. I have heard it said that kids say today, there's some kids out there saying today, that I am owed things. You owe me because I didn't ask to be born, therefore you owe me everything. Yeah, isn't that stupid? I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it like that, but I mean, it is. I mean, oh, okay. Yeah, but is that no? I'm sorry. You know. Well, that's true, but which one of us in here can create life? Not without the other half. Not without the other half. And who creates that life? God does. So which of us in here sitting in here can say, I did not? Because God put you here. Doesn't matter. God put you here. So, we talked about that. Okay, verse 7, because I've got to move on. Again, I saw something meaningless under the sun. And we're going to get back to what we were talking about earlier. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil. Yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless and miserable business. There are two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them fall down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. What were you talking about a while ago? About having someone else? When you're by yourself, it's very difficult. But here's the other thing about that. When you're by yourself and you're sitting there and you're working, what does it say about his wealth? Is he content? Are we content with what we have? We can be, but are we? Do you want a heater for your pool? I mean, are we content? 3, I know. Who's keeping score? Are we content? Do we want something different? Do we want something more? Do we want something more than what we had? Do we want just something just a little bit better? Do we want something just a little bit bigger? Are we ever content?
I have bought a 6-inch telescope. First time I've been through it.
You want a bigger one? Are we happy with what we have? Hmm? Content.
But is it wrong? You're saying, is it wrong to want more?
I didn't say that.
Saying we're wrong?
No, I didn't say that. What I'm saying is, are we content? Here's one man, he's by himself. He doesn't have anybody to give anything to. He has nothing. There's no family, there's nothing. But yet he keeps working and working, and he's not enjoying life because he's working, because he's building this wealth. And what's he going to do with it? We talked last week about what's he going to do with it. He doesn't even have anybody to give it to. What's he going to do with it? But it says he doesn't use it. He doesn't. Why am I depriving myself of this enjoyment? But he doesn't say he started enjoying his work, did he? He just kept on working. Better for two to be together because they have a better return on their labor. Because what?
But again, being one, I can be content as a one. I can enjoy life as a one. There's nothing wrong with being a one.
This is in general. I'm not talking about you specifically. Exactly. I think you're right. That's exactly right. Well, the thought here is two people, things are easier. When there's two people, things are easier. Things are easier. If somebody comes up against you, you got a wad of money. If there's two of you together, they might not hit you in the head and take your money. You know? And so, there's support. There's support. The same thing. Then you're worried about them taking your money too. Better a poor but wise youth than an old foolish king who will no longer heed a warning. The youth may have come from prison to the kingship, or may have been born in poverty without his kingdom. And I saw that all who lived and worked and walked under the sun followed the youth, the king's successor. There was no end to all the people who were before them, but those who came later are not pleased with the successor. This too is meaningless and chasing after winds. Advancement. It talks about advancement. How a king, it's better to have a young king that will listen to other people than it is to have an old king who's not going to listen to anything anybody says. And people will follow whomever they follow, but it's all really doesn't mean anything. It's all meaningless under the sun. And my time had just run out. But we read through those 2 chapters. So, thank you for your comments, and we will go again next week. So thank you very much. I've got other things I've got to do right now, hon. I don't have time for this. We'll take this up at the house. We don't need to discuss this in front of everybody. Not that I'm worried